everybody, I hope you're doing well, and season's greetings to you. Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas, whatever you're celebrating or marking at this particular point in time, or Shogatsu, or whatever it might be. Just enjoy yourselves and stay safe and healthy. I'm not sure whether this video is going to come out before Christmas, as it were, or after, but whatever you're doing, I hope you have a great time, be it with your family, your friends, or whoever you're celebrating with. So, let's crack on with this Q&A. So I've had some great questions which I've held over from the previous video, which came from my patrons, as well as some new questions from my patrons, as well as a few that have come in through Twitter. So just remember, if you leave a question in the comments below, I may feature it in a future Q&A video. It can be anything about Japan, what I'm doing here, anime, manga, video gaming, you name it. Anything that's sort of relevant to this channel, including perhaps pixel art advice, drawing advice, all those kinds of things. Everything is a good question as far as I'm concerned. So let's start with some of the questions that I held over from last time, which came from long-standing Patreon Phil Cobley. So once again, thank you for all these questions, Phil. I hope you enjoy the next batch of answers. So Phil's first question this week is, have I seen Weathering with You yet? Well, I'm glad to say, Phil, that I can finally say yes, I have. So for those of you unaware, Weathering with You is from acclaimed anime director Makoto Shinkai, and his previous feature, Your Name, went on to be an unbelievable hit, creating new audiences for anime that just didn't exist before, and creating further legitimization, shall we say, of anime in the West and so forth. So obviously expectations were very high for Weathering with You. The name for Weathering with You in Japanese is Tenki no Ko, which means Children of the Weather. You may have heard of it called that. And likewise, Your Name was Kimi no Nawa, which is Your Name essentially in Japanese. So you may have heard of his films through those names. But he is a director that I have been aware of for some time. I think the first feature of his that I saw was probably over 10 years ago now, with 5 centimeters per second, which even though I felt that there was a few flaws perhaps with it, was exceptional. And certainly from that point I made a great deal of effort to find out about his back catalogue, and discovering his amazing A Place Promised in Our Early Days, which if you've not seen, please go and try and find a way of watching that, because it's very good, even though again it has a few little issues, but it still stands out as something that I immensely enjoyed. And Your Name just raised the bar through the roof, essentially, as far as I'm concerned. You know, when you consider the quality of the artwork, the animation, the soundtrack, but most of all the characters and the storyline was just completely enrapturing. I felt a lot for the characters that were portrayed in Your Name, and to this day, there are very few feature-length anime that really tops that for me. So I think everybody's expectations were very high after Your Name of what Makoto Shinkai might do next. But obviously Weathering with You has been widely reviewed as being amazing, a worthy follow-up to Your Name and so forth. And so it's taken me a while to get round to it, and I finally have. So the question is, what did I think of it? And I feel bad for saying this. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Sorry, Phil. I'm not sure what you thought, but so first of all, stunning to look at, absolutely stunning. Raises the bar probably just another little notch higher. I could quite happily watch Weathering with You with it muted and so forth, and thoroughly enjoy it. Visually it is just a stunning piece. Some of the artwork in it is some of the very best that you'll ever see in anime, as far as I'm concerned. And and it's the realism that it portrays and so forth is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And overall the storyline is it's got an interesting idea behind it. It riffs on some of the familiar parts of Makoto Shinkai's previous stories. A lot of parallels have been drawn with features like Your Name, but I'd suggest that perhaps in some respects it lends itself more towards 5 centimeters per second in parts, and A Place Promised in Our Early Days, and perhaps Your Name, but that was just my takeaway from it. So why do I think it's okay? And the main reason is that I felt almost nothing for the main characters, and I don't know why that is. I don't think of them as bad characters. I don't think of them as bad people being portrayed. I think what it was is that I just lacked the empathy. I felt that I didn't really know the characters, their backstories. Okay, so I don't want to regurgitate the story, but it essentially starts with Hina, and she is ostensibly in a hospital room, and we learn that it's actually her mother that's in the bed and so forth. And as she looks out the window, she sees this amazing ray of light come through the rain clouds and that, which is shining on the top of a building that's in the distance, and she is drawn towards this building, which turns out to be what looks to be an abandoned pachinko parlour. And actually, as she gets to the rooftop of this building, she discovers there is a Shinto shrine, which is where the shaft of sunlight is basically directing her towards. And so she approaches and basically to sort of obviously pray to the spirits and so forth. And as she enters through the torii gates, she is taken into another realm. Or that's kind of what we observe through what happens in that scene. Meantime, Hodoka, and again, I'm not going to regurgitate the whole story, but I think this is important and relevant to what I'm trying to say about Weathering with You, is that he's a runaway, and he's on a boat that is taking him from his home, which is an island that's way off the coast of Tokyo, heading towards Tokyo, and he is enraptured by this awesome rainstorm that basically deluges the boat that he is on, the ferry, and as he goes to observe this awesome storm that is rolling in, he goes out onto the deck of the ship, and there is a sudden downpour, and it's only by the grace of Keisuke who rescues him, basically from sliding off the end of the ship, as it were. And so we then pick up the story where Hodoka is in Tokyo trying to find his place and so forth. And I'm not going to go any more into the story in that, but this is basically where a little bit of my issue with the characters comes from. There is very little backstory at this particular point in the film about why Hodoka is running away and so forth, and also whilst we obviously can feel a bit of empathy that obviously Hina's in perhaps a tricky place and that, because there's clearly somebody who she's her mother is in hospital. Again, there's no real backstory as to sort of the whys and wherefores, shall we say, sort of something to build up that level of connection with the characters, shall we say. And eventually through, various contrivances and so forth, Hodoka and Hina meet, and basically Hodoka gets work with Keisuke's magazine publishing company, and they go into business and so forth, and various things happen. But I'm not going to spoil it any more than that, because obviously there are going to be plenty of people who are going to watch it and find it amazing, and I don't want to take away from that by basically regurgitating the plot. But essentially the reason why I didn't really feel a huge amount for Weathering with You was just because I didn't really feel any emotional connection to pretty much any of the characters in the film, to be honest with you. I'm not sure whether everybody would agree with that. Maybe that makes me a little bit, hard-hearted or something like that. But, it just felt like with Your Name that I felt much more connection with these characters who were yearning for each other. And I didn't really get any real sense of, sort of intense yearning with Hodoka and Hina. It just seemed a bit like, well, we're kind of together and we kind of like each other, and that's kind of as much as I got from it, really. There is a particular point in the film where you obviously realise that, yes, they obviously do clearly feel something for each other, and, there are some interesting ideas surrounding that. But the other main issue with, well, there's three main issues. The second main issue that I have is with the pacing of the film. The start of the film builds everything up very nicely and so forth. It sets a certain amount of picture but it just seems to lose all momentum in what I would call the second part of the film. Not the second half, because the first half takes more than half of the film up, really, or at least it seemed so to me. And then what happens in the last, the resolution of the film is it seemed very rushed, quite contrived, a bit too convenient, some of the way that things were resolved, and there's just various plot points which make, to me, very little sense. But Keisuke is a divorcee. He is fighting for custody of his child, but there is a scene towards the end of the film where, through everything up to that point, you can see that he's trying to be very careful about not losing potential custody of his daughter. And then there is a particular scene where, very rashly, he throws it all away, and you don't really get a sense of, like, there is nothing up to that point where you felt like, oh yes, he's, leading up to that action, as it were. It just almost comes out of the blue, and you think, like, well, why have you done that, mate? That doesn't really make any sense. And then the overall resolution of the film seems, I don't know, maybe I just need to watch it again and maybe spot some of the things that I've missed. But it felt like, I don't know, that there is certain allegories to climate change and so forth, and how, maybe this is a world that is already on the wane, shall we say. But it felt like that may have been something that came out as they were making the film, like, oh, do you realise that this may be an allegory to the climate crisis and so forth in the world. And yeah, I don't know whether that was something that I'm just, being almost tone deaf to, that was, clearly being shown in the film, but it wasn't totally obvious that was perhaps what it was also describing. It just seemed at times, a bit of a mess. There were a number of, and this is the third point, which I slightly alluded to with Keisuke's actions and so forth in the film, where there was a number of plot points which were just completely unresolved, and also certain characters just felt too contrived for their own good. I'm just going to remind myself of Hina's brother's name. So where is he? Nagisa, I think it is. Let me just see. Is it Nagisa? Yeah, Nagisa. So this is Hina's younger brother, and what a strange character. He literally probably only exists for a singular reason in the plot. Otherwise, he's just like, I don't get you. You have no overall reason to exist. I didn't really feel that there was any chemistry between him and his sister, really. Although at one point in the film, it seems that they do have some form of connection, but otherwise he seemed to only exist for a particular point in the plot, as it were. So overall, I felt that visually it was absolutely stunning. But I'd have to say that, and it's important to stress this, that it's possible that Your Name is Shinkai's masterpiece and so forth. And certainly, I could point to perhaps potential things in like 5 centimeters per second and A Place Promised in Our Early Days that were perhaps a little contrived. Perhaps the plot didn't quite stitch together a little bit. But overall, the impact of those features was much greater than Weathering with You for me. And those four particular works of Shinkai's are, they all sort of riff on a similar kind of set of emotions, shall we say. But I felt that Your Name and 5 centimeters per second and A Place Promised in Early Days just got that point across a little bit more effectively, shall we say, particularly Your Name, because it does end with a very endearing payoff, shall we say. But yeah, it's not bad, but it's not great. So for me, it's a solid 5, and a lot of that is made up of the fact that the visuals and the direction is absolutely stunning. So yeah, I can't say I'm disappointed. I was interested in it, and I'll probably watch it again at some point, and maybe that will change my opinion. Maybe I will feel a bit more for the characters. But yeah, I had high expectations, but just to very quickly finish this off, not everything that I rave on about or appear to have a great deal of love for is a solid 8 or 9 or even 10 out of 10 for me. A really good example of that would be Ranma 1/2. In the pantheon of manga and anime, I would say that, Ranma is probably, if you just look at it, just what is the manga, just trying to be as rational as possible about it, I'd say that it's a 7 as manga goes. It's not a 10 for me, and there are good reasons for that. I felt that there were certain aspects of Ranma where I'd have loved to have seen the story take a great deal more pathos on, which was, occasions in the story arcs that, Takahashi Sensei created, that it did go there. But unfortunately, it always ended up in certain contrivances that just took the edge off of it for me, which is why it would be a 7 for me. And the anime of Ranma 1/2 is very hit and miss. That probably is also a 5 for me, although there will be a few of the OVAs and a few of the episodes which are, a 9s for me. So, but overall, it's just the sagginess of some of the anime and so forth, which just really bring it down. And so that's Weathering with You. Maybe you're surprised at my reaction to that, and maybe I do need to watch it again, but I'm not going to be rushing to do that. I feel that I need a bit of time just to digest what I had seen, and so there it is. That's what I thought of Weathering with You. Okay, next question, and a bit of a shorter answer for this one. Again, this one's from Phil. Have I been to any arcades? And the answer is, yay! Yes, I have. Where I live is pretty rural, and there is a very small arcade at the top of a supermarket. It's sort of a destination in town which has the KFC, it has a Moss Burger, and obviously the Super as well as a few other stores. So it's almost like a mall in a way, although none of the stores are sort of individually separated, but there is a small arcade at the top. But to be honest with you, there's not really much of any great deal of interest, although there is a Mario Kart 2-player cabinet up there, which maybe a bit of fun one day, but otherwise it's very much more orientated to younger children. In Morioka, I've been to a couple of the arcades there, which have been good fun, but a lot of them are crane machines and so forth. So the main 2 arcades that I've been to were in Yamagata-ken, Yamagata Prefecture, where I met up with a Twitter friend, Shin-san, who very kindly spent the day showing me around his hometown and so forth, and showing me a couple of the arcades, one of which was actually just a little bit further north into Tendo City. But basically, we had a great day of, we played some Street Fighter 5, we played some, the latest House of the Dead game from Sega, we also played some, what else did we play? Taiko no Tatsujin. We played a few sort of games, and it was great fun, and I really enjoyed it. There was no sort of real retro cabinets, although I think the arcade that was in Yamagata City, I'm sure that had Suzuka Ray Towers there, but we didn't play on that. But whether that was a more modern version of the game that I'm not aware of, or whether it was the cabinet from all those years ago, I'd say it probably was. It looked like it. I just didn't really pay any real attention to it. I just noticed it as we was leaving. I was thinking, oh, maybe that's the only retro cabinet or cabinets that they have in here. So they were really great fun. It was very kind of Shin-san to give up so much of his time to show me his city, and really enjoyed it. And yes, it was really great to enjoy the cabinets. Obviously, with my ALD wages, I can't be putting too much money into these machines because they're 100 yen a pop. And so my wages only go so far. But yeah, it was really great and really enjoyed it. So, and I'm looking forward to when Corona is hopefully a thing of the past, where I can then more freely go to the arcades that I've seen in Morioka and so forth, and not have too much fear that, in a small enclosed space, where there is a lot of obviously contact with surfaces that, potentially, could be harbouring the dreaded virus and so forth, freely go into them and have a bit more fun, shall we say. So looking forward to that, and needless to say, when I do eventually get back to Tokyo, I would love to enjoy some of the arcades in Akihabara and so forth, and where else they may be. I don't know whether there's any arcades in Ikebukuro, for example. I'm sure there probably is. But yeah, so that's been a great deal of fun. So Phil's next question is what system have I been playing the most? What have I been collecting the most for? What have I enjoyed the most? And the answer for that is the Super Famicom. Yeah. The reason for that is that I had a Super Nintendo when I was younger, but the general relative expense of games, even at the time, meant that I never had a great deal of games for the system. And when I moved from Japan, from the UK, I could have sworn that I at least still had my copy of Super Mario World, buried away, but I couldn't see any sign of it. So it's possible that even that got sold. So it's been really great to pick up a Super Famicom here, and some of the games which I would have loved to have had back in the day, like, well, this was released as UN Squadron in the West, but obviously as Area 88 in Japan, because obviously that's the manga that it's actually based after. So games like that have been really great to pick up and enjoy, but also some of the games that I previously had for the my Super Nintendo back in the day, like Secret of Mana. Obviously I've bought it here as Seiken Densetsu 2, but yes, so it's been really enjoyable picking up some games for the Super Famicom. Obviously I love my 16-bit stuff. I love my 2D pixel art. That's why I draw a lot of pixel art and so forth. So that's easily been my favourite. Just very quickly on the PC Engine side of things, I have the Terra Onion Super SD System 3, I think it's called, so I can pretty much play any game that I would like on that system, except for perhaps the Super Graphics titles, but that's okay. I think there's only about 7 or so titles for that system, and I've got Super Ghouls and Ghosts on the Super Famicom, so I'm not really missing out on too much, I don't think. Yeah, the PC Engine games are far and few between, or few and far and few. You don't find many of them, and where you do find them, they are actually quite expensive here. Certainly not bargain price territory like Super Famicom is sometimes. You can find something that you might think, oh great, it's maybe a salamander, I think it was, that I saw in Akita City, but you're still looking at maybe 3,000 to 4,000 yen, and I think that may have been Hue card only as well. So it's not a particularly cheap system to buy for, even in Japan, in my experience. And if you do see PC Engine, you're probably looking at only 1 or 2 titles, and they're like usually the baseball or a soccer game or something like that. So, sorry, I said soccer. I mean football. I have to teach American English here. So yeah, PC Engine is a little bit of a tricky system, even in Japan, to find for. Maybe if I was in a more populated area, maybe if I was in Osaka, or maybe if I was in Tokyo, or somewhere like that, maybe I would find more of it. But what I have found has been quite expensive. I have, however, picked up a multi-tap, which is great. I only actually have 1 controller for my PC Engine, but I have bought of the period multi-tap. Yeah, so I picked up an of the period PC Engine multi-tap. 1,200 yen, so that works out about £10. So, and yes, it's obviously quite early because it's got the old NEC logo there, but it is the 5-port one, which is great, fully boxed and so forth. Basically, I think it's new old stock, really. Yeah, that was worth picking up for that price. Okay, so next question comes from Jost80. Now, Jost80 is another long-time Patreon, so I can't thank him enough for his support over what has been over the last year. So his question is, culture shocks. What has surprised me most about Japan? I'm gonna not talk about the language. I think that may be a video topic all of itself, and I think I've talked about that also in the most recent video which I did at Taro, where I talked about the culture shock with regards to the language, and I drew, don't know why I say we drew, don't know, but anyway, I drew back in I've lost a train of thought. That I drew after going to Taro. So in that I talked about obviously the language and so forth. So that's been discussed. So I'm going to talk about perhaps 2 other things that have really surprised me. And the first thing that's been a big culture shock coming to Japan is actually how dark it is. So most people, when they see pictures of Japan, they will see sort of maybe pictures of Tokyo. It's all bright, it's all neon, it all looks beautifully lit up and so forth, and just how bright everything is and so forth, and how colourful it is. And there's no doubt in the daytime that, particularly in seasons like spring and even summer with its vibrant greens and all the colours of the flowers, and into autumn with the beautiful changing colours of the leaves and so forth, that Japan is a colourful place. But when it comes to night, I mean, I live on the edge of the town here. It's not a particularly big town, but I live on the edge of the town. But it surprises me how much of it is unlit, even in the town centre or the city centre. Around here there are basically 2 street lights, and that's only because I live basically opposite a major crossroad, or a big crossroads at least. But you can be driving around main streets in the town and there is very little street lighting, and I come from a village where there was, well, basically no street lighting. I just was very surprised that even driving around places like Morioka, you can be driving on ostensibly a main road, and really apart from the light that is coming from perhaps car park lighting, or the shops or the restaurants and so forth, there is actually very little lighting around towns and cities. It can feel really quite dark. Maybe I'm the only person that feels that, and it certainly means that you get some amazing views of the stars at night if there's no clouds and so forth. But it has to be said that I found Japan quite a dark place at night, and I wasn't really expecting that. I was expecting it to be at least a little bit more street lit, but no, it's really quite dark around. And I'm sure a big part of that is that I do live in the boonies, but yeah, I've been surprised even walking around places like Sendai that, the main reason that the streets end up having any form of lighting at all is because it's coming from restaurants or maybe shops. But yeah, it's a little bit unusual. Certainly coming from the UK, which is much more street lit in towns and so forth. You can go along virtually most residential streets in the UK, even in sort of small villages and so forth, and they will have some form of street lighting. But what you get in Japan is a lot more patchy. You do get a bit of lighting, but yeah, it's surprisingly dark around. The second thing which goes on from that is I'm not used to having summers where it's basically dark at 8 o'clock in the evening, or even before that. Coming from the UK, even in the very southern extremity of the UK, which I used to live in, in June, by mid-June, come the summer solstice, the sun would still be out, and yes, it would be almost be below the horizon, but it would still be light at like 9:15 at night, and the sun would only just be going down. And of course, if you lived in Scotland, or when I used to visit Scotland, if I went to the north, like the Western Hebrides and so forth, like the Isle of Skye and so forth, in June, the sun was still only just about going down at 11 p.m. at night, and I miss those beautifully light evenings. And whilst the winter is virtually identical here to the UK, I mean, in the UK where I used to live, the sun would be going down at maybe 3:45, and here it's about 4:15 or thereabouts. But of course, obviously, we have the mountains, so once the sun goes behind them, for intents and purposes, it's getting dark. And so yes, the winter and maybe the spring is a little bit similar, but yeah, I must admit I did miss the longer daylight hours in the evenings and so forth, and particularly in June when we had a lot of wet weather here. That's quite common for Japan. It's quite different climatically, regardless of the humidity. With the rain, obviously, it was very cloudy, and it did mean that there were some days, even into July, I seem to recall my birthday, it was really gloomy, and it was dark by maybe 7 p.m, if not a bit before, maybe 6:30, because it was that gloomier of a day. And that bit has really taken me by surprise, but that is what it is. I think the first time I experienced that was when I went to the United States in 2004, and I was quite surprised, sort of seeing the sun going down around about 7:30, maybe 8 o'clock, and and that took me by surprise that not everywhere was the same in terms of summer having gloriously long summer evenings. And I think that is going to be one thing that I will miss. I'm sure if I was further south, maybe if I was down in Kagoshima or somewhere like that, it would be a bit different, but not massively so. But yeah, those are my two biggest culture shocks, which may surprise you. Because really they're not too difficult to adjust to. Okay, another good question comes in from Matt, another long-standing supporter of me on Patreon, so thank you so much, Matt, for your question. And his question is that obviously everybody hears about Japanese food, the differences and so forth, and, whether I've been enjoying it, and whether there's been actually anything that I have been taken aback by that I really can't get on with. And yes, there are two things, but overall, I've really enjoyed Japanese food. I've always probably enjoyed eating fish more than I have meat and so forth, and I've always preferred things like rice over potatoes and so forth. That's just always been the way I have been. So overall, the food here has been great because I've always been a bit of a lover of seafood, and I have no problem with there being sort of like cockles or whelks or similar kind of things, in a miso soup and so forth. That's all fine as far as I'm concerned, very tasty. But there are two things that I struggle with in terms of the food that I have eaten so forth in Japan. The first one may surprise you, and that's sweet potato. Now, I have no real problem with sweet potato that has been roasted. It's quite tasty and so forth. I couldn't eat a lot of it, but it's quite enjoyable. I don't mind the odd bit of roasted sweet potato. Where I come unstuck is just plain boiled sweet potato. Now, I have a savoury tooth, which is possibly why I quite enjoy Japanese food. But just boiled sweet potato, it is just, it brings out the sweetness even more, and I just don't enjoy it at all. But then the same can be said for just plain boiled potatoes. And, it's a trope of British cuisine, just boiled vegetables, boiled potatoes and stuff. And perhaps I grew up having boiled potatoes with some form of overcooked vegetables and something else for dinner, perhaps. But the only reason that boiled potatoes taste of anything is because you usually smother them in things like mustard or salt or perhaps pepper or something along those lines. The actual potatoes themselves are pretty bland if they're just boiled. Boiled sweet potatoes, because it's just sweet ick as far as I'm concerned. And yes, I have to eat them when I'm at school, particularly if there are other there are students around, because you've got to give a good impression that you always eat up your meals. You don't let anything go to waste. But no, I much prefer just plain rice or I can't abide by sweet potato, and that goes for where I've had it. So roasted, it's okay too, as long as it's not too much of it. But boiled, The second thing, and I'm sure a lot of people say this, natto. I love soybeans. I will have them with rice. I will have them in curries and so forth. I love edamame. That very tasty. But natto is essentially like a fermented soybean gloop. Essentially, it's got a bit of a name to describe it in Japanese, which I'll just remind myself of. Yeah, never. Yeah, never. Yeah, natto is definitely never. It's also never as far as I'm concerned. But never is like an onomatopoeic word for like gloopy sorts of food, shall we say, almost like an ooze. But maybe I'm prejudiced by my fact that I don't like it, and it's usually mixed with maybe a mustard or something like that. But it's got such a unique taste that I find hard to describe. It's almost medicinal in its taste. It's just got a twang that bends my tongue in ways that my taste buds are not really meant to go, shall we say. And there are almost zero foods that I can honestly say I don't like. There are foods that I'm not keen on, but I'll happily eat, shall we say. But unfortunately, natto is well up there with things like rice pudding and tapioca pudding and so forth. Just can't stand that consistency of that kind of thing. Even things like hot custard, I get a bit like that. So it's the texture of the substance, but also the fact that it's fermented that just no, don't like it. So yes, sweet potato natto. Okay, so the last question comes from Kev. Now, he sent this one through Twitter, so thank you very much, Kev, for your question. There's actually two that Kev has sent to me. I'm going to keep on over till the next Q&A video. But the question that he asked is, why do I call my car Akiko? I have a little K car here in Japan. It's Nissan Days, I think, is the make and model of it. It's a little buzz box, but it does the trick. We've certainly shared quite a few kilometres together. In fact, actually, about 15 kilometres, quite the distance. So why do I call it Akiko? Well, anybody who is familiar with Japanese will obviously be aware of its free writing systems, hiragana, katakana, and kanji. And essentially, if you write Akiko in hiragana, it will always be written the same way. That's just the way that hiragana and also katakana work. But once it's put into kanji, it actually gets different readings because there are many words in Japanese that are the same, but are only differentiated actually through the kanji that is used to write them. So a good example of that would be something like kaki, and kaki, as far as I know, could actually mean well, I know of 3 possible meanings for kaki. So I believe that kaki might be one of the conjugations for writing. I might be wrong on that one. That's the one I'm unsure about, because in my mind I'm still very much at the beginning of learning Japanese, albeit, you know, probably a couple of years into making some serious efforts with it, shall we say. But the two that I'm certain of are both kaki for oyster and kaki for persimmon. And a persimmon is like a little slightly sweet, usually dried out fruit that is commonly grown here in Japan and tends to be consumed in winter when they come to their best. So they almost look like a little orange on a tree, actually. But anyway, so kaki can be written in kanji using 2 ways. And it's only really through maybe the context of the conversation or actually reading the kanji that you would be able to tell kaki from being an oyster to being a persimmon, essentially. So now Akiko, like many Japanese words, can also be written a number of ways depending on the kanji, and they can mean things, you know, Akiko written certain ways can mean like Asia, a child and princess, I think maybe one of them. Some of them centre around brightness and child. It all depends how it's written. Now, I'll be honest with you, I probably only looked at the meaning of Akiko after I decided to basically give my car name Akiko. Now, it's just been something that I've always done with my cars. They've always ended up with names like sometimes they have cute names, sometimes they have completely ironic or sarcastic names. Like I had a Ford Escort many years ago that was at least almost 20 years old when I had it, which was called the Beast, because it was anything but the Beast, albeit very reliable. But Akiko, I just thought was quite a cute name. But there's also a much more simpler name for why it's called Akiko, and it's just a little nod of the hat to my love or interest of the Commodore Amiga, because it's one of the custom chips in the Amiga CD32, which was basically Commodore's last roll of the dice, a games console version of the Amiga 1200 computer. And basically inside of it, like all Amigas, it has custom chips that you won't find in other computers or games consoles that did various tasks for the system. So for example, the chip that dealt with sound and also disk access in the Amiga was called Paula. And also there are other chips like Agnes, which dealt with various operations to do with graphics and copying data and so forth, put simply, and also Denise and other various chips. And Akiko was pretty much I suppose the last custom chip, shall we say, that Commodore came up with for the Amiga, and it combined some of the functions that were in previous Amigas in other chips, but also did a few other extras like handling the CD drive and also some of the graphics processing for converting data that was for displays that were designed for PCs into Amiga compatible displays, shall we say, so that porting games could potentially be easier and also result in potentially faster graphics, shall we say, in certain 3D games and so forth. The functions of the chip bear no relation whatsoever to the name of my car. It's just a cute name, Akiko, and it's just a little nod of the hat to perhaps my interest in the Commodore Amiga, I guess. That's all it is, really. It's nothing special. That's all it means. Anyway, some great questions there, guys. Remember, if you leave a comment in the video, I will potentially answer it in a future Q&A video. And I guess it all remains for me to say is see you soon. Happy Christmas. Peace. So, it's come to that part of the video where I mention that I'm on Patreon. From as little as $2 a month, you can get early access to content, exclusive artwork through the post, your name mentioned on videos, as well as tips that I don't publish to the public. You can find a link in the video description below. Your subscription to my channel will also help me ensure that I can bring the latest content here from Japan.